Pop-O-Holics.
Welcome to Pop-O-Holics, the show about hot takes, hotter than pancakes. We're just a couple of dudes celebrating badass girls, a couple of T800s in a T1000s world. If this is your first time coming to the show, welcome. So happy to have you. We're not just your regular three straight white male podcast talking about movies. No, this one's extra special. We are three gentlemen of such standard and such rapport coming to you today to give you the latest in pop culture. What do we do on Pop-O-Holics? We theme our months. This is our last week of our women empowerment, our focus on female-centered characters in cinema. And today's episode is T2 Terminator 2 Judgment Day. One of my faves. Excited to dive into that, but I wouldn't be sitting here alone talking about that and this and the other. No, I'm joined by those two other white straight males I spoke of earlier.
Chris Conkling.
And Brian Dupree.
How does it feel to be white straight males, guys? Feels pretty great. Just all
feels a little dangerous in this day and age.
Really? I feel just fine. No, we were joking about that earlier, that Bo Burnham straight white male song. So funny. So what's on the agenda for today, other than enjoying our privilege? Well, we're going to be talking about the latest in pop culture news. We are going to be talking about what we've been consuming with our quick hits, our playlist of things that we've been enjoying the past week. We have our weekly community feedback section, and then we dive into the main topic, which is Terminator 2 Judgment Day. We have chapter titles, chapters in the podcast player, in your podcast player of choice. So feel free to jump around to what you want to listen to. That's why they're there. But we hope you stick with us. We do think it's going to be a tasty pod, a hot and tasty. So without further ado, let me check in with you guys. We haven't done that in a couple weeks. It's week 6 of quarantine. We're all working from home at this point for the most part. How are you guys doing? How are you guys holding up?
I am currently a little under the weather this weekend. I was hopefully not in any serious capacity, just a little bit of a headache right now, but largely doing okay. You know, I've seen my family a handful of times. We're all very close and kind of see each other often, so we're keeping track of if anyone's sick. My sister's a nurse, so we're doing what we can. But since I'm relatively close, it has been not too bad for me in terms of I am still social distancing for the most part, but being able to see my family once a week is keeping me mentally healthy in a way that I feel lucky for.
That's good to hear. Good to hear. Sorry you're feeling under the weather. Hopefully we can get through this episode
just
together.
Pollen. Nothing more
pollen.
than that, right?
Just pollen.
I did do a couple half-hour walks outside today, so I'm going to attribute it to that. Chris, you said the pollen thing, and it makes sense.
Just getting blasted with tree semen. Chris.
Yep. Well, I would be lying if I said that quarantine wasn't starting to drag on me. But there really isn't, too much to complain about. I'm very grateful that I still have a job that I can go to every single day, that my wife and I are both very healthy. As far as communicating with the outside world, I'm grateful that, the three of us record this podcast every single week. My parents have actually also been hosting weekly bingo nights for our whole family over Zoom. So we're still doing our due diligence and social distancing, but we're getting to see each other at least once a week, hang out for 3 to 4 hours, just playing bingo. We try to theme the dinners, so everybody tries to make the same dinner. So yeah, that's been nice. Friend of the podcast, Danny Lopez, just had his birthday a couple of days ago, and instead
Happy birthday, Danny!
Yeah,
Happy birthday, Danny Lopez. Instead of meeting in person, we basically just hung out on Zoom, watched a couple movies, and played Cards Against Humanity digitally. So, I mean, I'm very thankful that we're in the year 2020 and that there's so much technology available to still keep all of us together, even though we can't physically be together. So I think that's a very positive thing.
I have a question for you. How were you watching the movie over Zoom? How did you organize that?
So we didn't end up watching it over Zoom. We ended up using this site called Sync Lounge. It is predominantly used for Plex and I'm not going to go any deeper into that. But it's kind of like Netflix Party in that it's a way for you to synchronize streams. So it's the same as like going over to someone's house and sitting down on their couch and watching a movie together. The streams are synced up, so you still kind of feel like you're doing that. There's a chat on the side, so you're able to talk to the person still. So it was fun.
They need to really, one of these streaming companies, whether it's Netflix, and I'm looking at you, Netflix, I know you're real busy trying to keep up with demand at this point, but man, there's a huge potential for synced stream with a paid service. I mean, right now I'm doing a long distance thing with my girlfriend. There's a lot of people staying from home. Netflix Party works sometimes, but it's a plugin that has to be used in Chrome, which I'm not a huge fan of running Chrome on my system. And it doesn't work all the time. It's not perfect. So someone get their act together, because there's a lot of need for people that are traveling, and especially in times like this where you're trying to connect with friends and family. I've watched a couple things with Netflix Party, but it's really annoying because, like, you know, my girlfriend doesn't know anything about like how sound works. So we start playing something. I'm like, you have to mute, you know, or, you know, what we ended up doing was watching Netflix parties on our computer, and then we FaceTimed on the computer, and I plugged in my headphones, and she used, you know, Bluetooth, which isn't like ideal for a lot of reasons, but you know, it's way more it's like 10 steps, right? And me having to educate someone on how to get through it. So looking for that. As far as how I'm doing, I had a pretty rough morning. Just kind of been, as listeners may know, I'm very far away from home right now. I've been isolated, working from home for 6 weeks in my apartment in California, and it was a pretty rough morning. But then I had some bacon, and then it was good. And I watched the portal scene from Avengers Endgame, and you know, that is that we are recording this on the 1 year anniversary of Endgame, and brought me back to a packed movie theater in which I was crying next to my girlfriend watching Avengers. So good times are ahead, and I'm very, very lucky to have a place to live and a job, and all those things are great. And if you're struggling out there, our heart is with you. And as always, thank you to the medical community and some of our leaders in government that are helping us get through this time. Say something. You know what I'm talking about. You know who I think is an idiot. All right, so not to get too not political podcast. All right, that's it for COVID-19 talk. Let's move on into Brian's Wacky News Corner.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. So I announced a couple weeks ago that South by Southwest and Amazon Prime were teaming up to, even though South by Southwest is canceled this year, to still put some content online that would have been available solely at South by Southwest Festival itself. So as of this release, this is up and out now. You can get a free Amazon account. You do not need to be a Prime member. And there are 39 movies that are available. Feature films, documentaries, shorts, a wide variety of stuff here that, like I've said previously, this sort of festival screenings generally don't get wide releases and aren't always to YouTube or streaming services. So this is kind of a rare thing to be able to see some of these films. And if you are a cinephile like we are here at the Pop-O-Holics, I think it's something that is definitely worth checking out. And that runs through May 6th. So you've got a short time span, so check that out while you can during the quarantine time.
Have you gotten a chance to watch any of them, Brian?
No, so it actually starts tomorrow, technically.
Oh, yeah, tomorrow.
As of recording, yeah.
You know, there's a
Sorry,
date on the
loyal
show
listeners.
notes, Chris.
More to come.
We're breaking the wall here, breaking the wall.
But
yeah, I definitely
just edit
plan
it out,
to.
Christian.
I'm not.
There's no way. So yeah, that's South by Southwest on Prime, which goes through May 6th. So check that out. Okay. I think you guys are fans of this show as well. I'm not entirely certain, but what I believe to be incredible news. The Parks and Rec team is getting back together for a 30-minute episode that airs this Thursday, and I could not be more excited. It worked out perfectly. I just moved out from my roommates, but prior to that, they had just started watching Parks and Rec from the beginning. They had never seen it all the way through. And so I was rewatching a ton of this show with them. I had seen it all previously. I don't know if it was right after it aired, but sometime while I was in college, I binge watched that. And it's one of the greats. Obviously, very influenced by The Office. I think one of the same creators from the American version of The Office. But if you haven't seen this show, I would take this opportunity to start checking it out. And if you want to start here, I'm not sure how much of a learning curve there would be to get these characters. But this is one of my favorite sitcoms for sure.
Yeah, we are totally on the same boat. I love Parks and Recreation. It's good comfort food television. You know, like if you're ever feeling down, just like The Office, pop on an episode of Parks and Rec, and you'll feel better. I promise. But I'm super excited for this reunion. I'm very interested to see how it's handled, considering that everyone is quarantined. I'm assuming we're going to get a ton of footage over like FaceTime calls and Zoom and stuff. But it's exciting to see how Leslie Knope is handling COVID-19, which I believe is what this episode is supposed to be about. Like what Leslie's doing to handle this current pandemic. So I'm stoked. What about you, Christian? Have you watched Parks and Recreation?
I get a lot of crap in my office because I am not I'm a super fan of Parks and Rec or The Office. I've seen at least 2 seasons worth of content from both those shows, and I have nothing wrong with them. They personally depress the hell out of me if I watch more than one in a row. My girlfriend uses The Office to fall asleep, and she'll watch a couple episodes, and I have to zonk out. Like, for whatever reason, the magical world of funny banana business that is Parks and Rec and The Office, it makes me depressed to my inside. And that is just, and it's nothing with the quality of the show. There's no way I could make it through 5 seasons of something like that. And I've seen one-off shows and thought it was hilarious and thought it was really funny. So the world needs this right now. People love it. I don't want to sound like a dick. I've tried to explain this to people as much as I can, but it's like listening to a happy song and getting sad. It's perfectly fine. I'm actually really interested in this episode. I like the idea that there's a one-off episode and the fact that they'd be handling, COVID-19. I love all those people. All those comedians and actors are incredible. So this is really exciting. I just had to put my 2 cents in about why I haven't seen all of the Parks and Rec. And if, God forbid, you quote something and I don't get it, I'm so sorry that I have not seen all of this show. But this is exciting. I'm overall very positive about it. But I did have to clear the air on that.
No, that's always good to get our opinions known here. So I'm trying to be genuine,
right?
No matter how much of a psychopath it makes you sound like.
No, I mean, honestly, when you were saying that, I was kind of thinking it's like, I know a lot of people either work in an office or dread spending the next 40 years of their life working in an office. So I can kind of understand maybe not wanting to spend your free time in that setting, even if it's a funny thing, So I get it. I just want to say this episode is going to benefit Feeding America, which is doing a lot of work right now related to the COVID-19 crisis. And, there are a lot of hungry people. So always good to hear that as well, because it's not just a money grab. So yeah, that's going to be at 8 p.m. this Thursday. So tomorrow, as if you're listening when this episode drops. Okay, moving on to some video-on-demand movies this week. I had not heard of this movie, and I'm not sure why, but Arkansas is a crime thriller that is about a series of mistakes, the summary is a series of mistakes leads to a deadly collision between 2 criminals and a drug kingpin in Arkansas. So this is directed by Clark Duke with music by the Flaming Lips, which I was like, okay, Flaming Lips scored. This is probably enough to sell me on this movie regardless. But yeah.
Also, Clark Duke directing is like very strange.
Directorial debut from him, yes.
Good for him.
So this stars Liam Hemsworth, Michael Kenneth Williams, Vivica A. Fox, Duke himself, Eden Brolin, Chandler Duke, John Malkovich, and Vince Vaughn. So you've got a handful of heavy hitters. As I said, I didn't see a lot of advertising for this. I think it's smaller. It's obviously going straight to VOD, so I'm not sure what to expect. But yeah, when I saw the names attached to this and Flaming Lips soundtrack, that was enough to pique my interest.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything about this movie until this very moment. But I was a huge fan of Clark Duke in college. I used to love the show.
Greek?
No, it was the web show that he made with Michael Cera. I think it was called Michael and Clark.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
When watching that show, I had just started film school, and that show was one of the main influencers, and in me being like, this is totally something that I am capable of doing. Like, there isn't a whole lot of production value in this.
Right.
We could definitely pull this off if we wanted to. But yeah, he's
And now
he's a
look
very,
at you now.
look at me now, not
Podcast,
doing
critically
anything.
acclaimed film podcast.
Yeah. But I'm a huge fan of Clark Duke in everything that I've seen him in. He's a very funny guy. So I'm interested to see how he's capable of directing. That's very, very new to me. Christian, what about you?
No, not familiar. I think I know who, like, if I close my eyes, I know what this person looks like, but I don't know the main person. Flaming Lips, interesting. They are a band that plays at Bonnaroo a bunch, and people love them. I have mixed feelings on the Flaming Lips, but it sounds like an exciting project from all the people involved. So I'm not gonna be a hater. I think it sounds cool.
Yeah, so hopefully one of us will check that out and let you guys know, but that'll be out this Friday on VOD streaming services. A couple of things coming to TV this week. Both of these are Netflix releases, actually. Never Have I Ever on Netflix is actually, it's out now, and it's the new show from Mindy Kaling. So the Netflix description is, after a traumatic year, an Indian American teen wants is to go from pariah to popular, but friends, family, and feelings won't make it easy on her. So this is a coming of age, 16-year-old girl teen comedy. Basically, it was advertised as being in the same vein as like a Booksmart or something like that. Having watched the trailer for this, it seems very much in that vein. Funny, kind of raunchy comedy that's also very real and, a real teenage perspective. My understanding is that Netflix kind of approached Mindy Kaling about a story about her childhood. And so this is kind of based in her experience. She's one of the main showrunners. And yeah, I figured... good time to highlight a new female-driven project by Netflix here this month, even though it's something that may not be particularly interesting to our age range or group. But demographic.
I personally
exactly.
loved Booksmart. I thought it was hilarious.
Straight white males.
Had you guys heard about this one at all?
Chris is gonna kill me if I say that phrase one more time.
I have not heard about it. No. Christian, have you?
Why haven't you heard of it, Chris? Is it because...
There's a very specific algorithm on Netflix based on what you consume on the platform. Mm-hmm. And I guess
you're going to blame the algorithm. Mm-hmm.
I guess Netflix deemed that I would not be interested in the show, therefore didn't pump any advertising my way or notifications about it. Not my fault. Blame the algorithm.
It's also not out yet. So this is another one that, we probably wouldn't have seen it because
that's really not an excuse, Brian, because Netflix reminds me about upcoming things constantly.
Chris, I was trying to give you an out. And
I appreciate it.
Throwing yourself right under the bus.
What
that's
can
nice,
I do?
Though.
I don't really boot up Netflix or keep in touch with a lot of the things Netflix is doing. So I'm going to say I actually have not booted up Netflix since I watched the last episode of Tiger King. So I go on with a mission and a purpose. And
I'm just going to say I haven't done it myself, but Castlevania Season 3 has been killing it in terms of historical numbers for that show. So I think
Netflix in general is we need to get up. It's real up. Yeah, they're actually
especially.
Yeah, and I mean, because they have so much stuff in the can, they've been able to do it, but they're going to run out very, very soon because they're kind of on like a 3 to 6 month in production, post-production cycle. And so so we still get content from them, but I imagine that's going to dry up in the next month or so.
So with that being said, another project that is coming out soon is the new Ryan Murphy show called Hollywood. So this is set in post-World War II Hollywood, and it's kind of a exploration of what this time period would have been like if people of color and people of non-straight people, basically different sexual orientations, were out and involved in the industry in a more real, comprehensive way, and how they would have had to deal with the obviously backwards social perspectives of the time. I know you guys aren't as big of fans of Ryan Murphy as I am. I feel like most of the stuff that he's done, The Politician was the last thing that he did on Netflix. I think this is the first of a deal that he had with Netflix that they're the main producers on. But I loved The Politician that he did, and this one conceptually, I am very interested in Hollywood. Obviously, we do this podcast, and this sort of thing where I'm sure it's going to be poking at the current system that exists today and showing kind of how it's all rooted in this old Hollywood.
Dominated by who, Brian? Dominated by who?
The straight white man.
Say the words.
So that's Hollywood. That'll be out this Friday as well.
That's really cool. I hope it can stay focused, because I think I would like. I think it'd be interesting if you just took one of those groups and just flipped the script with with straight white men. I think that would be really interesting. But this concept's bordering that, so I trust that.
In some of the reviews, because I was trying to get an idea of what the show was, and I think there's going to be some characters who are like fictional characters who are added in, but they may also do things where like characters who weren't able to be openly gay. I think Clark Gable was one that they were talking about, will be openly gay in this universe.
Wait, what?
Is it not Clark Gable?
Who's Clark Gable gay?
A lot of the men in Hollywood back then were, but obviously, the industry didn't allow you to be open about it. Have you seen Hail Caesar? But we're getting way off topic here. But I don't mean to out Clark Gable if he's not actually gay. But in one of the reviews, there was a famous leading man who you would have heard of. That we now know to have been gay. But yeah, so that's Hollywood, the new Ryan Murphy show on Netflix this Friday.
Check it out. Thanks, Brian, for that weekly news. Expertly delivered. You're doing well. Did really good. Wouldn't even thought you were under the weather, Brian. Such a great job. bringing the people the news. Let's move on into what we've been consuming with our quick hits.
Quick hits! Quick hits! Quick hits! Quick hits! Quick hits! Quick hits! Talks too long!
A quick hits.
Keep it quick.
Welcome to Quick Hits. This is the part of the show where we talk about what we've been personally consuming and chat about it for a bit. Pretty standard podcast shit. So let's start with you, Chris. What have you been? I'm so excited to hear about what you have on your list here. You have been watching Middleditch and Schwartz on Netflix. Tell us about it.
Yes, sir. I've been watching Middleditch and Schwartz, which
Switch
is
in middle swatch.
Switching Middle Schwartz. Middleditch and Schwartz. God, I can't say Ben Schwartz's last name. Anyway, this
Schwartz.
is Schwartz.
Use the Schwartz.
This is a series of 3 different improv specials put on by Thomas Middleditch and Ben Schwartz. And let me just say that they are some of the best improvisers I have seen in a very long time. This is a comedy tour that the two of them did last year, where they basically went on the road, put on a bunch of improv shows in front of huge audiences, which isn't something that happens all too often. But this series is broken up into 3 50-minute long specials, and the premise essentially is at the beginning of the show, Thomas Middleditch and Ben Schwartz will ask the audience if they are looking forward to something or dreading something, and then they will kind of zero in on someone's premise, do a little bit of probing to get a little more information about what that person's talking about, and then they will proceed to put on a 50-minute improv show surrounding that premise. So I don't know, loyal listeners, if any of you are very familiar with the improv format, or if you've attended any improv shows yourselves.
Yes,
but and I know Christian and I have, and yes, and that's a great little improv humor there, Christian.
Yes, and am I good at this? Am I doing good?
Am I doing the improv yet? But I highly recommend this series. It's broken. It's the way Netflix has formatted it is season 1. I haven't dug too deep into research for this particular show, so I'm not certain if anything else is coming. Brian's shaking his head at me saying it's just the one season. Brian?
I haven't dug deeply, but I've seen this with Netflix when they do like a mini series that's something like the Dave Chappelle
Right,
2-part special.
right.
It'll say season 1, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's just how they classify it. But I actually watched the first episode of this, Chris.
Awesome.
and
What'd you think?
It was absolutely hysterical. I haven't watched a lot of improv, and I've heard some people talk about going to really bad improv shows.
Oh, it can go south very quickly.
Which is
Yeah.
also a fantastic experience. It's something I enjoy quite a bit.
But yeah, the one that I watched was about just watching them poll the crowd. It was the one about the marriage, episode 1.
Yes.
They're getting secondhand information from someone who is very tangentially related to the people being married, but somehow in the wedding party. And just
so
how
funny.
it plays out throughout it's really, really good and impressive. And seeing them try and keep a track of all the characters that they're creating is part of the fun as well. I just want to say before I give it back to you, Chris, Clark Gable's sexuality very much debated in Hollywood lore, but Rock Hudson was the one who was
Yeah,
referenced.
Rock Hudson. Yeah, that was the big AIDS thing. Once he came out as gay and stuff, Ronald Reagan was like, I knew Rock Hudson. I think we should take HIV seriously.
That was a fantastic impression.
Yeah,
If
not
we were
bad.
indeed in some type of improvisational theater right now, that would have gone over really well, I think.
Yes, and
Brian, to piggyback off you mentioning them having to juggle multiple personalities and a bunch of different names, I believe it's in episode 2 or 3, where they like really get themselves into trouble by just extending their cast way too deep for their own good. If I had to rank all 3 episodes, all 3 specials, I would have to say number 1 was probably my favorite, then number 3, and then the second episode at the very bottom. I laughed at all of them, but that's how I would rank the 3. Anyway, if you're a fan of improv or if you're a fan of comedy, hugely recommend Middleditch and Schwartz. Go check it out. They're great.
yeah, I think they're experts and at the top of their game. I haven't even seen it, and I already know it's going to be hilarious. I've seen Middleditch do and Ben Schwartz do improv outside of that, and hopefully this special can capture the magic, because it really is so good live. It's one of those things that when you see it done really well live, it just takes it to a whole new level. So hopefully the show is able to capture a little bit of that. But I'm a huge fan of improv, and it is a very hard art form. I did an improv podcast with myself. Want to know how that
You
worked
did.
out? Well, it's not a podcast anymore, but everybody seemed to like it. So maybe we should bring it back.
I thought it was really good.
Yeah, you should definitely have that online, because I've tried to show people and been like, why is this not playable anymore?
Yeah, if you thought that Ronald Reagan impression was good, boy, do we have a treat for you. Brian, moving on to you. So that's Middleditch and Schwartz, available on Netflix. Brian, you have watched Sorry to Bother You on Hulu. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so this is one that has been on my watch list for pretty much since it came out. I know it got a lot of attention, kind of like a cult classic type thing in 2018 when it came out. This is the directorial debut of Boots Riley, who is a rapper, producer, screenwriter, film writer, and activist who is known for being the lead vocalist of The Coup and Street Sweeper Social Club, which are groups that I had never heard of Boots Riley prior to this project. But one of the main pulls here is it stars Lakeith Stanfield and Tessa Thompson. So obviously any Marvel connection is relevant to our world. But so seeing Tessa Thompson here was nice. But
Wait, which superhero is Lakeith Stanfield? Because I need to go see that movie right now.
well, that means he's TBD. He's in the running still. We'll see where he pops up in the MCU later. The description on Wiki of this film: the film follows a young black telemarketer who adopts a white accent to succeed at his job. Swept into a corporate conspiracy, he must choose between profit and joining his activist friends to organize labor. So this is a very dark comedy that is essentially, I would define it as absurdist to a large degree. There are running gags and stuff that don't really make a whole lot of sense. I'm not sure if there's something, there may be something culturally I'm missing in something. There's an earring gag where the Tessa Thompson's character is wearing progressively like more ridiculous earrings that people are always commenting on. And it's a good gag, but I feel like there's something I'm missing about it. But this movie is consistently ridiculous, really funny, uncomfortable at times, is very much, trying to speak on how capitalism deals with labor and how that shows itself in this. I was talking to Christian about it. It kind of reminded me almost like of a Gilliam-esque type world, like Brazil.
Interesting.
Where you have this kind of, it's like you see there's a lot that you can relate to, but it's not exactly our reality. But yeah, this movie is working on so many levels, just the straight comedy level, the deep, dark, what the rich elites are doing in the shadows type of level. And somehow it balances it the whole way through to be a really enjoyable and ridiculous ride. It's the type of movie that once you get into the last third, it's just batshit insane. Like, it takes a turn that you could not possibly predict. So don't read about this movie, please, if you haven't seen it. But something that I would definitely highly recommend for people watching.
Yeah, Brian, we did chat a bit about this offline, and I really enjoyed this. I enjoyed it quite a bit. It is very silly, but I think it something we were comparing it to Get Out because it is also kind of an up-and-coming director, also very focused on African Americans. So it is very similar in a lot of the messaging of it. But I think this movie does such a phenomenal job of establishing its absurdist world, whereas Get Out towards the end, just kind of out of nowhere, is kind of throws this concept to you that you're like, that's pretty wacky. And this movie off the get-go is just like, it's a wacky world. I mean, his white person voice, quote unquote, is Patton Oswalt. Like, it's literally just a different person, right? And there's so many things that the world gives away to let you know that it is just a completely separate universe from the one that we exist in. And I enjoyed a lot of this movie. It is crazy, and I need to watch it again. I saw it once, and the pacing was a little weird. I would say, and again, comparing it to Get Out's paced a little better front to back, but there's so much more. I think this is a more intelligent movie in a lot of ways, and when it's funny, it's super funny. When it's dark, it's pretty dark. It can get pretty dark. But there's a section towards the end of the movie that takes place in like I want to say a fraternity house, right, Brian?
Well, it's Armie Hammer's character's house, and I was going to bring this up. The movie is worth watching just to see Armie Hammer do like a 2-foot long line of cocaine. That's one of the most ridiculous things you'll ever see. But yeah, there's a pretty hilarious Armie Hammer in this movie.
Yeah, that whole section is working completely, and it's ridiculous. And I think the movie at its best. Cool. Anything else on? Sorry to bother you.
I think I said it here, or when we talked, but if I had to describe it, I'd say Eyes Wide Shut meets Brazil.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, huge recommend for me as well. That is Sorry to Bother You, now available on Hulu, which is really cool. What have I been consuming? Well, I've been down a bit lately. Far Away from Home. Just finished up Final Fantasy VII Remake. Very excited to bring you guys a bonus episode very soon. Just waiting for Chris to finish it and seeing if we can get another guest for that. Very excited. I went back and I was going to play the original Final Fantasy VII. And then I remembered that game is 30 years old and not unplayable. I don't want to be mean. There's a lot of people that love that game, but just not doing anything for me at all. Not making me feel better. I wasn't super interested. I've never been head over heels in love with the Final Fantasy VII universe. And then I was like, let me play a new game because we're about new beginnings here. So I went to go buy Kingdom Hearts 3 because I said, you know what? I'm going to go on this journey with Brian. We'll be playing the same video game. It was on sale on PSN. I think it still is on sale, loyal listeners, for the next week or so before the end of April. So if you want to get that, check it out for like $18. So I was like, I've only played the first Kingdom Hearts like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever it was. So let me watch the story so far. So I popped on a YouTube video, and one of the many that are like Kingdom Hearts up until Kingdom Hearts 3. And I watched the entire 30-minute video. And at the end of it, I was like, there was no way in hell that I am playing Kingdom Hearts 3. Just the recap of the game, not to dive too deep into all the problems, but when part of the main story lore was available in a Flash game, and when every character has 6 or more personas, and the rules don't make any sense, and their personalities don't, I'm sorry, no amount of spectacle or gameplay would bring me into trying to give a shit about that world.
Look, Christian, there's the heart character, there's the soul character, there's the shell character, there's...
And then there's nobody.
Yes,
That's
also
the shell character, basically. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of that world, but I'm not going to defend it. Like it is so convoluted, and it, like I said when I kind of reviewed Kingdom Hearts 3 for us a couple of months ago. Wow, almost a year ago now, I suppose. Over a year. Sorry. Anyway, there's definitely some gatekeeping unintentionally going on with that series. Like, you really need to be invested in the franchise, or at least not be a casual to like fully appreciate what's happening in Kingdom Hearts 3. That's why I'm so impressed that Brian is making his way through the game. But yeah, it's unforgiving when it comes to things that you should know before going on that adventure, I think.
I will say, I'm on the last boss battle. I think for $18, you can't really go wrong with this game. It's about, in my experience, 35 to 40 hours of playtime. Because of that learning curve, the first half of the game, I was trying to stay invested, kind of just lost track of trying to follow what was happening on the back half of the story. But the gameplay has largely kept me in it, and I think it is worthwhile, especially at that price point.
And in the world of JRPGs, it is very important that you're invested in the story. And if I'm going into the game before going, like, I actively hate the storytelling in this universe, because I was like, what's going on with Donald and Goofy, or Goofy and Donald Duck? And it's like, oh, they aren't important characters. And it's like, oh, you're companions throughout the entire journey? Okay, fuck that shit. This game makes no goddamn sense if, like, your party doesn't matter. And oh god, Tony. So I don't want to hate on it. If you like Kingdom Hearts, good for you, Brian. I'm glad you're sticking with it. So then I was like, but man, I really want to get my RPG Final Fantasy fix. And then I saw that the 10-2 Final Fantasy 10-2 remaster collection available on PS4 for $24. Now, Final Fantasy 10, I could probably record a 15-hour episode, so I will try to keep it brief, but. This game is the game that got me into JRPGs. I had played Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9 before 10, but they all really never clicked with me on a long-term thing. Just couldn't get invested in the story. And this game really changed things. It was the first game available on PS2. And for me, it holds up the best out of the entire Final Fantasy series as the best of the entire series. And I think it has the advantage of it was running on new hardware, but the HD remaster, this game still looks great. It's still very playable, and it has my favorite battle system of any of the games. And just going through it, I'm already 20 hours back in. This is going to be my fourth playthrough, if I'm not mistaken, third or fourth. And I've played it like once every like 7 years or so. It's magical, and it's making me so happy. And I don't want to hate on other Final Fantasies. It just kind of has the combination of everything I like. The whole party matters in the story and in gameplay. There's a really great thing they do with the system, which is that certain characters are better against certain enemies. So you have to cycle through your whole party. Oftentimes in JRPGs, you're like, I like these 3 characters, and you just use them the entire time, and none of the other characters matter. Or one of the characters dies like halfway through the game, so you don't bother leveling that character if you're doing a playthrough, because they're just dead, or they leave the party for a significant amount of time. This game lets characters go off on their own at sometimes, but the whole party meets up eventually. I love the story. The voice acting, from doing some research, is probably the weakest part, but it is the first Final Fantasy mainline series to introduce voice acting. I found out the American actors recorded their voiceovers without ever seeing any of the gameplay. So people like
that's weird.
It is weird and not how it's normally done, but it just goes to show you that there's a lot of awkward silences and weird line readings. One of the main characters is a young girl named Yuna, and she's doing like a William Shatner kind of voiceover. There's a lot of problems with voiceover. But the battle system's really great. I love it. I love that status effects matter. I love the story. You know, it's the first Final Fantasy that I've played that really does the best job of world building. There's different races and culture. There's racism in the game. There's like this, there's faulty morality. The game centers around a a corrupt religion that runs a secular problem with all of society. It's like this very big open game with so much philosophy in it, so much theme, so much resonance for me and life. And I have problems with it, but man, if you're interested in getting into JRPGs, for my money, this is the best Final Fantasy to start with. If you're okay with the voice acting not being so good, Tidus starts off as a really annoying main character, but I think he becomes a lot more mature. And the game is just structured really well. So forever, it'll be in my heart as one of my favorite video games of all time. On my 4th playthrough, of course, gushing about it. I'm going to beat it again. It's going to happen. I'm already like, it makes me feel like I'm at home, which is very important during these times. Chris, do you have as much affinity for this game as I do?
So, Christian, I'm just super pleased that you have found something that makes you feel good and that it takes you home. I know that within our social circle, Final Fantasy X is a fan favorite within our friend group. I also know that it has a ton of fans outside of our social circle. I personally never really jived with Final Fantasy X as much as you have. Like, I'm not a huge fan, and I know this is so stupid, and I'll probably need to revisit the game because I've never fully beaten the game. I'm not a huge fan of skill trees. I actually kind of despise them. So I really like the fact that in Final Fantasy VII Remake, there is an auto feature for how you want to balance your skill tree. That means I don't have to pay attention to it at all. From what I recall, Final Fantasy X has a very involved skill tree. And, about 10 hours into the game, I was just like, I'm done with this. I don't want to do this anymore. But I know doing that is so critical to making sure that you can progress in any type of Square Enix game. Like, if you are not familiar with how to build out your character, you will not beat the bosses. So yeah, my experience with Final Fantasy X has not been as involved with yours. Like I said, I've probably only played 10 to 20 hours of the game, and only once before giving up. But I did not have as much fun with it as you tend to.
So, Chris, I'm in the same boat in terms of games with those sorts of skill trees. This time through Kingdom Hearts, it's far more basic than the Final Fantasy ones. But even there, it was kind of like I have to remind myself to keep powering up weapons and things like that. Christian, you'll have to remind me what the boss is, because I played this game and I got to a boss, and Christian, when we were on the phone, you called it the cup check for the game, when it's like, this is the point where you know if you're going to be able to do well in the rest of the game. And that's where I put the game down permanently. I imagine it's around the 10-hour mark too. Do you know, Christian? Have you gotten back to that point?
No. You would have been much deeper in the game. You would have been probably 30, 35 hours once you hit that point. Yeah.
I know I played a good amount.
Yeah. It's the Seymour. If you're a fan of Final Fantasy X, and you will know there's a point when the difficulty spikes quite a bit, and you hit Seymour, who's a constant villain throughout the game. Great villain, by the way. You fight him on the edge of a snowy mountain, and if you have not balanced out your party and focused on making sure that you have a good core party and that your supporting members are good as well, you will get just annihilated. And it's very frustrating because regardless of whether you're at a good level or not, it's a very long fight. And kind of the worst cardinal sin of this game, where it shows its age the worst, is there is no skipping cutscenes, even if they happen before a fight. And the cutscene before that one is long. So there are old game pain points, but in terms of a 20-year-old game and its pain points, I find it very minimal, and I quite enjoy the story. And I'm on my 4th playthrough, so I have not died yet. I probably will not die. There's a couple characters, Kamari and Riku, who are members of the party that you can experiment with, and that's where you can have fun experimenting with the skill tree. But as long as you play the base mode, because there's 2 different modes, expert and non-expert. And I actually play the non-expert because it starts where I would put these characters anyway, so it's not that big of a restraint. In the sphere grid. The sphere grid's very intimidating, but once you get it and understand how to look at it, I feel like once it clicks, you're good. And it took me up until my first playthrough getting to a hard point like that to really look at it from another perspective. But once you get it, you appreciate it. And I certainly appreciate that in a Final Fantasy game, there's a little more customization and you can kind of balance out your characters more. I do like that freedom, but with that freedom comes the responsibility of not being an idiot and making sure everybody has the same, like that you forgot to get a bunch of characters' health. But I don't know. I can't really see it the same because I'm so familiar with the system. But I remember being intimidated on my entire first playthrough. So it's understandable. But if you need tips or tricks or any help, I've got a great Final Fantasy X expert right here. And this is a 50-hour JRPG. There is over 100 hours of content in the HD remaster. There's a whole new endgame dungeon. There's a lot of other bonus stuff, and some of it's not great. It's definitely not perfect all around, but it is a huge game, and man, it's good eats for me.
I might have to revisit it at some point.
It is harder. It's harder than some Final Fantasies in certain parts. I don't think it's a hard game overall, but there are a couple cup checks, and where Brian was describing is. Even on my last playthrough, it was like a hard fight. I didn't lose, but it definitely has some skill jumps, has some really weird difficulty ramping. And I don't think there's an easy mode. There is a mode to switch the soundtrack from arranged and original. So that's good, but it is one difficulty, which is hard if you're not good.
When we do our bonus episode on Final Fantasy VII Remake, there are definitely a couple moments which I'm sure we'll be able to talk about that I can definitely identify as those quote unquote cup checks. So Christian and I have talked about that in length on our conversation.
Yeah, and I'm sure I'll mention more about Final Fantasy X in that discussion. I've kind of been doing this as researching more Final Fantasy games to make that bonus ep all that it can be. But really glad I made this decision. It's weird because I always feel like it's a waste of time to go back and play a game you beat. But when it's one of your favorite games, it's
nothing wrong with that.
And I feel like I've said this before about seeing stuff new as like an adult, but I am really appreciating the stuff that's smart about this game. I am really appreciating how amazing this story is and the world is and the whole cycle of it. I could go on a 10-hour, again, very long rant about how intelligent I think it is and how it is the most complete to me world that's ever been built in a Square Enix game, in my opinion, and why I enjoy it so much. So really enjoying that. The HD remaster comes with 10.2, which is a all female led side thing. I actually started that off first. I don't know if I'm gonna play it, but it seems like a fun side affair. It's just harder to go back when it's something you're not as familiar with, but I might try to get through that as well. We shall see. But that's available. It's only, I think, $24 on PSN, so a good pickup. And if you are new to JRPGs or you like a little bit deeper customizing, I think that's what this offers more of than other Final Fantasies. The skill tree is a very attractive thing to people who are accustomed to more in-depth RPGs where you can customize your character a bit more. Cool. So,
yeah, and I definitely acknowledge that. It's just not my cup of tea.
And I really wish you could enjoy like the story. Like if there's a way you just watch the movie, version of it. I don't know if that would be insanely gripping, but
there's this thing out there, Christian, called YouTube, where people have taken and spliced together videos that only incorporate the cutscenes of video games.
Yeah, the worst.
Or there are also these things called Let's Plays, where you watch someone else play the game.
I don't know if I can.
So there are definitely ways out there for me to get exposed to it.
The cardinal sin of this game, and this is the final thing I go on, that has not aged well and does not fit well with our current theme, is that the design of the characters is a bit. I had mentioned this about the big booby animated girls. This game is probably the worst one of them all in it. And it's really sad because it is one of my favorites. But you have characters like Lulu, who's a black mage. Her boobies are real out there, and she's a very great character and very intelligent and wise. And it's just like every cutscene, and the camera decides that sometimes it is going to be like for no other reason other than the boobs are in the center of the shot. Have the boobs in the center of the shot, and it's egregious, and they have weird angles coming in. There's actually no nudity in the game, but for a game that's for like teens and it's a lot. There are characters that have like a lot of characters designs are they'll have armor around, but then they just have a thong on, like literally just a thong on.
Wow.
Yeah, one of the characters, the way they shaded it, looks naked even though she's in like a full jumpsuit. I mean, it's not great. It's not a great look. It is a problem that I think has gotten a little better, but it is one of the worst in the series. And I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that there is that fault that has aged very, very poorly. I enjoyed it quite a bit as a young teenage boy, but I don't think it's a particularly appropriate. It probably did not help my image on women growing up. So for that, it should be faulted for. That has not aged well, and is no way to present. And it's impractical. You have a full warrior woman. Why is she wearing a fucking thong?
Fair points.
It's a magical thong, Christian. It raises her defense.
Yeah. Great guest Hillary Wise on our episode of Birds of Prey had a great conversation. We had a good conversation about this, so go check out that episode to hear more thoughts on that. All right, I've gone too long on Final Fantasy X, but it's a long game. We're going to be moving on into our community feedback section with our weekly poll.
Please don't leave your thoughts on hold. Come on down to a weekly poll. Please don't leave your thoughts at home. Come on down to a weekly poll.
Hey there, loyal listeners. Welcome back to the Pop-O-Holics weekly poll section. This week on the Pop-O-Holics weekly poll, well, last week actually, considering that we were talking about Silence of the Lambs, we wanted to kind of retroactively go back and hear which films that we've covered this month in our Female Empowerment Month that you thought were the best or your most favorite. And full transparency, we didn't get a whole lot of participation this week. We actually have a 3-way tie between Birds of Prey, Alien, and Atomic Blonde.
No, we don't.
No?
Refresh your poll. We got more votes in, baby.
I definitely didn't just vote.
Still looks the same to me.
No, we got Alien in front.
All right. Well, I'm going to go off of Christian's word here. It seems that Aliens come out the front runner of this particular poll, thanks to Brian putting in a last minute vote on our own poll.
I'm sorry, guys.
So,
I had to break the tie.
That being said, it's really important to us that we're bringing you content that you, the loyal listeners, are enjoying. So if you have any recommendations for upcoming weekly polls or any suggestions for how we can make these polls more acceptable or more accessible to you, please feel free to email us at popaholicscast@gmail.com or reach out to us at Pop-O-Holics on Twitter. We are very accepting of your feedback and suggestions and would love to hear from all of you. We have moved our polls over to Twitter. As I've mentioned in the previous episodes, we're no longer hosting them on Facebook because, like I said in the past, we want to provide more robust options for you guys instead of just your standard two-choice polls. So we're excited to hear from you, and we'll see you next week for the Pop-O-Holics Weekly Poll.
And if you'd like to rate us 5 stars on iTunes, we'd greatly appreciate that. Go on to, Apple Podcast, as it's called now. Go on and rate us 5 stars. Say whatever you want about us and just give us 5 stars, and we might read your review live on the show. If you have feedback for us, send it to us at popaholicscast@gmail.com. On your favorite social media platform of choice, search for Pop-O-Holics Podcast and find us. Join us. Follow us. We're having a lot of fun. Join in on those polls. Get involved. We love it. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, we are going to be discussing, I'm so excited. It's my favorite movies. We're going to be discussing Terminator 2, Judgment Day. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. Pop-O-Holics.
Same make.
These were taken at the West Highland Police Station, 1984. You were there.
Same model.
These were taken today.
You have to let me see my son. He's in great danger.
New mission. Once, he was programmed to destroy the future.
You don't know what it's like to try to kill one of these things.
Now, his mission
Get down.
is to protect it.
That is from the trailer of Terminator 2 Judgment Day. You know, it's been great. We did Silence of the Lambs last week. We're doing Terminator. Both the trailers featuring the infamous Don LaFontaine, who I believe has passed. Yes. The late great.
He's the voiceover guy?
He's the guy who does the movies.
Yeah, R.I.P. Wow.
You know, last week when we were listening to the trailer for The Silence of the Lambs, I was actually going to bring that up. Like, I miss that. It's so quintessentially 90s. And you no longer get voiceover in trailers, for the most part, at least. But growing up, that was like,
true.
that was how it was.
So Terminator 2 Judgment Day, released in 1991, directed by the one, the only, the man with the magic touch, James Cameron, written by James Cameron and William Wisher. This had a budget of about $94 to $100 million and grossed $520.8 million in 1990 bucks. And it stars Arnold Schwartz, Schwartz in Nager, as the Model 101, also known as the T-800. Let's be honest, we call him the Terminator, Chris. I don't know why you had to get so nerdy. He is the Terminator. It's so stupid as Model 101. Go fuck yourself. Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor. Robert Patrick as the T-1000. Joe Morton as Miles Dyson. And much, much more. Edward Furlong as John Connor. I wonder if he did anything after this. Maybe we'll talk about it. Maybe Chris knows. But what are we going to be talking about in the context of today? Well, this is wrapping up our Female Empowerment Month, our focus on women in cinema. And although I would say this is definitely a guy's guy movie, this is a bro-y action movie from the 90s. It is, I think, quite progressive for its time as far as highlighting Linda Hamilton's character, Sarah Connor, in the way that they did and writing her the way they did. So I'm excited to get into it in that context. So we'll be talking about our personal history with the T2 and the Terminator franchise in our latest viewing. We'll be talking about the themes and our opinions of the movie. We'll be talking about this in relationship to the Bechdel test. How does Sarah Connor compare to our other leading characters that we've talked about this month and in cinema as a whole? And would we recommend it in the year 2020? So a lot of cool things to get into. We're going to let you know right off the bat. We are going to be spoiling this movie throughout. So if you haven't seen it, this movie came out in 1991. You found a random podcast called Pop-O-Holics, which good on you. Good choice. That was called Terminator 2 Judgment Day or something of that accord. And you're listening to it. So just know, don't be a dum-dum. We're going to spoil it. So don't get mad. Cool. So let's jump into it. Chris, as always, when we don't have a guest at least, we're going to start with you. I don't know if it's as always, but right now, today, we're going to start with you.
At this moment.
At this moment.
On this timeline.
You know what? Fuck it. We're going to start with Brian. Brian, what is your personal history with T2 and the Terminator franchise?
Hostile takeover here. Yeah, I remember these as being definitely some of the first R-rated movies I was allowed to watch. And I'm not sure my parents actually knew I was watching them because I was with my aunt and uncle, which is where I watched a lot of the movies that I enjoyed. Me and my dad watched a lot of movies together as well. But I remember, and I have to talk to my cousins about this because how I remember it is my uncle was like, you guys have never seen the Terminator movies? Let's watch them both right now. And I don't know if we watched them back to back or if it was over a weekend or something. But back then, I was just so struck with the action set pieces. And I think after this, I had gone and seen the ride/show at Universal Studios that they had, which I was a huge fan of. It was kind of an interactive live
motorcycle
show.
Yeah, for sure.
So I was familiar with it from there. Honestly, after watching it that time, I am not certain I've watched it front to back since then. And I know it was the kind of thing where every time I would see it on TV or something, it would always be at the part of the movie where they've just broken out Linda Hamilton's character and they meet up with the people who are storing her arms for her or wherever it is. And it was always this part of the movie that seemed like it's just after a giant action set piece, so it kind of drags from there, and it never hooked me. So I just never came back to it. And after this time, I have to say it was a ridiculous mistake, because I did watch Salvation when it came out and actually enjoyed that. I'm a pretty big Christian Bale fan. I think that movie kind of gets walloped. I haven't come back to it, but I enjoyed that at the time. I haven't ever watched fully the third T3 or Genesis or the latest one, Dark Fate. So I can't say I'm a stan for this series, but coming back to this, it's made me want to kind of give the other ones a shot, even though...
Maybe Salvation. I remember liking Salvation. I'm willing to rewatch that. I've heard very terrible things, but I enjoyed it just like you when I saw it. But I think the rest
not
of it,
worthwhile.
I don't. I'll share my feelings.
I definitely want to come back to the first one at least, because I know it's a very different movie. It's got a lot of that first person stuff from Schwarzenegger's perspective that they don't do nearly as much in this one. So I definitely want to come back to that. But yeah, this movie, I talked to you, Christian, said I may not be a huge fan of this one. Coming back to it, this movie is so up my alley that I just feel like a fool for not having consistently been watching this.
Don't feel like a fool, Brian.
I first started watching the Terminator movies in high school. The Terminator, T2, and Rise of the Machines. Ooh. I, like you, Brian, when Salvation came out, I was very excited for it. I haven't seen it since I saw it in theaters, but I do remember liking it. And I know that movie gets a lot of flack. So I think the three of us are on the same page here in that we all enjoyed Salvation when we saw it. I too really like Christian Bale. What's his name? Sam Worthington was like really big at the time when that movie came out and having come off of Avatar. So I remember enjoying the movie. Maybe upon revisiting it, it wouldn't be as good. But I ended up skipping Terminator Genesis only because the reviews were so terrible for it. And having watched T2, I am now actually really interested in finally going and watching Terminator Dark Fate, because I've heard mixed reviews. I heard that some people really like it and some people think it's just as garbage as Rise of the Machines and Genesis. So Terminator is one of those franchises that I do really enjoy. It's just unfortunate that such a large percentage of these movies are not good. You know, like this movie is so exceptional, spoiler in my opinion. And, all the sequels just can't really recapture what these first two movies have done.
Yeah, this is the best one. And this is really the only one that anyone needs to watch. I think all the other ones are living in this film shadow. I saw this film before I saw the first Terminator, and this was like something my older brother was like, oh yeah, we got to watch this. This is like a great movie. And it was one of the early rated R movies that I had seen, next to The Matrix. I think The Matrix might have been the first one that I actively watched like with my parents. And it is crazy that all this time this movie still holds up and it just has some of the best action set pieces. And even still watching this day, I'm like, oh man, they just knew how to make them good because they still hold up so good. As far as the Terminator series, this one definitely was like most of us just like was my entry point. I've seen the original Terminator and it's okay. Like it's iconic for a lot of other reasons. And it's just more of a horror thriller movie than this is like a straight action movie. So I think that it's still probably fine. I've only seen that movie like once or twice. I've seen Rise of the Machines a lot. I liked that movie a lot when I was a kid.
I feel sorry for you.
I really like the fight scene between him and the chick robot. That's a pretty cool fight scene. But that's probably the only hallmark of the movie. But it does deal with a lot of cool like absolute fate kind of things, because it kind of ends up being like, well, it was inevitable because how is this still happening without all this? There's some cool lore stuff, but definitely has gone downhill, since then. And again, I want to revisit Salvation. I'm not hopeful because it seems like everybody keeps telling us our memory's terrible and that movie sucks, but we'll have to find out for that. Genesis, I started and got 15 minutes in before I actively shut off the movie. It was just really silly, and Arnold Schwarzenegger's all CG. Like he's a CG body double looking person.
Oh god, that's terrible.
And I've heard mixed things about Dark Fate. This movie makes me want to go back and look at those and maybe check out Dark Fate or Twisted Fate or whatever the fuck it's called.
Dark Fate.
But I would say that this is definitely a series of a great high and then many misses, unfortunately. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of like why ruin a good thing? Like T2 is just so good, and it's crazy that it is, like, as you guys might agree with me, one of the best 90s action movies that I can remember.
100%.
Hands down.
No doubt.
When I was watching, when I was rewatching it for this episode, the sequence when Arnold Schwarzenegger and John Connor are on the motorcycle fleeing from the huge semi, that sequence, that whole action sequence in my mind is like quintessential classic Hollywood action set piece. Like I think that sequence in and of itself will go down in film history as one of those things you think of when you think of action in the industry. Like it's just so recognizable as being from this film. I don't know what your opinions of that sequence are, but that's how I feel about it.
But they keep even like, it's like that's kind of small potatoes compared to where they go. Like, you're right, it is very iconic, and I think it's the first time you're like 25, 30 minutes into the movie, and it's like, oh, wow, like, this is cool. But the movie seems to keep like upping itself, and I feel like it, you know. But by the time we get to the end of it, there's a helicopter chasing it. It's like a very similar idea, but just how inventive the whole thing is with all the set pieces. It's pretty incredible. So this kind of leads us into like our opinions about this movie in particular, and then we'll get into some of the themes. So Brian, let's start with you again. Chris, we'll get to you. Don't worry, settle down. It's fine. Brian, what are your opinions on this movie overall?
Yeah, it's hard to believe I didn't remember, and maybe it's because I haven't sat and watched from the beginning, but how thematically rich this movie is. And it's crazy because it is anchored around 3 or 4 just huge set pieces that kind of walk you through the act structure of the movie. And the one you're talking about, Chris, it's ridiculous. It honestly feels like they just had a lot of used cars that they're like, yeah, we can trash every single one of these. Let's just smash a giant semi through. They had the semi go off a bridge into that under area, land, and it just looks like they actually ran this thing off of a bridge, and it's unbelievable. I texted you guys when I started the movie today. I got a 4K copy of this for like $7 at Christmas.
Wow.
With one of the specials. Yeah, it was $7 or $8 at Best Buy, I think. And I had been waiting to watch it. Finally had an excuse here. And the first scene where we see post-apocalypse, post-Judgment Day action. And, you know, we watched Alien this month. A lot of the external ship shots look incredible. But from 79 to 91 is obviously a huge difference, and seeing how he can have ships be dynamic in the sky and look real already at this point, I was just blown away. I was like, yeah, this feels like The Mandalorian in terms of how their ship designs look almost.
I would
almost
say
feels
it looks
that
better
good.
than a lot of the stuff in The Mandalorian.
It was blowing my mind. And then you see the Terminators themselves and how incredible all that stuff looks. The one thing that didn't hold up in this movie for me is, and I get it because you have to have an actor at some point, but with the T-1000 being shot, how they show bullets, you can tell there's just things. I love that effect. You do. It's just like it looks like
they're
tinfoil
flash cutting and they're
pasted onto his.
Yes.
And it does look like that, but I love it. I don't know why.
The whole thing is I enjoy it for what it is. But it's
I do too. And when it goes digital, or if it's not digital, when it looks good, it looks incredible. You know, it's clear that they couldn't animate every shot with him in it, or whatever the special effect is.
It's with him running actively. It's also a combination of the sound effect they're using, which if you are listening on a high end,
Looney Tunes almost.
It's like. It's really.
He is made of liquid metal.
True.
Yeah, but it sounds like a cartoon poop,
like metallic gack.
Yeah,
I was thinking gack too. Yes, that's so funny.
It is very gacky. Yeah.
So, but just general opinions. I think this movie feels obviously 1991. To think about what the internet was and where personal computing tech was, how much, and obviously. We've talked about it a few times. Sci-fi tends to be a lot of times very indicative of what is to come in the future. And this movie feels like it's talking about today with the way it's dealing with automation, artificial intelligence, something like Christian. I appreciate that you can like a movie like this because I think it does something that is comparable to Blade Runner in the way that it can show you growth of a potentially non-human thing and still get you to relate to it, right? And obviously, we'll get into the themes because there's a voiceover at the end that kind of perfectly encapsulates that idea, I think. But Arnold, something I completely forgot about this movie was if I had to classify this movie, it'd be hard for me to not include comedy. It's like I was laughing a lot in this movie, and I wasn't necessarily expecting it. But it's definitely more lighthearted for humor, right?
Than the first one.
Okay, because the relationship with him and John Connor is just so adorable. The father figure dynamic, how much he comes to rely on him, and seeing the Terminator genuinely try and change and adapt to help protect this character. It just really worked for me, and Arnold's deadpan was really comedic in a way that felt like the writing was leaning into that element, and I really appreciated that with, like we were saying, how serious and straightforward, like thriller, the first one is.
Yeah, and it's so smart to be like, all right, well, Arnold Schwarzenegger embodies this character. Like, how can we play to his strengths? And it's like, you're a robot, just act like a wooden stick figure. Right. And because they keep that going the whole time, it's completely convincing. You're like, there is no man that plays a robot like Arnold Schwarzenegger. And for all his acting faults, for all the things he's been in where he's just ridiculous and it's just like so out of place, this Austrian bodybuilder just being like, I'm a dad, or I'm a cop. There's so
Those
much.
Those are my cookies. Put the cookie down.
Put the cookie down. And I love Jingle All the Way. Don't get me wrong. But
classic.
But really leaning into his ability to just be completely still and have these movements, right? It's pretty great, and it works throughout.
Yeah, the relationship between Arnold Schwarzenegger and Edward Furlong in this film is like the heart and soul of this movie. I know we're supposed to be like really focusing on Sarah Connor, considering this is like our female empowerment month, and I'm sure we'll get to it, but like really coming away from this movie, their dynamic is so strong, like you said, Brian, and it's so believable. It's like this boy and his monster meets like he's also filling that father figure role that you're talking about, but it's just so fun getting to see them play off of one another. And like you said, watching Arnold over the course of the film go from speaking as though he's just a robot to forming more colloquial sentences by the end of it, where he's like actually speaking like a person, which makes the end of the film where he has to be destroyed that much more tragic, because if he had still been just a robot like he was at the beginning, we wouldn't feel bad for John or Sarah in that moment where they have to destroy what's essentially become, this is going to sound terrible because he's a person, but what's essentially become like a pet or a family member, Because I know Sarah mentions literally in the film that she watches the two of them and she can see how John kind of views him as this father figure that he's never quite had. Men have come and gone in his life solely because Sarah Connor's been using them to learn as much as she possibly can to ensure that they're ready for the inevitable, Skynet apocalypse, basically. But I never quite get there personally. I always feel like it's still, like I said, a boy and his monster, or like the T-800 is kind of like a pet that can talk, basically. I don't know if that makes me a terrible person, but that dynamic is so strong and so much fun.
Of the story, and I agree, it is lacking severely. Talk about a movie that needs Father Figure, the song by George Michael.
Oh, George Michael, yeah.
Yeah. That would have been great to put it right there. But, it's her reflecting on the fact that he never has had a good father figure, and her being like, right. Is this robot really the best dad that has entered our relationship? Right. Like, out of all the men that I've been with, and
it's like solely there for him. Like it's right, exactly. Its prime programming is to ensure that he survives, which is what a good dad should do. Like essentially give his life for John, because that's what he's programmed to do. That's its only responsibility, basically, ensure his survival and follow his orders.
Yeah, and I love their relationship's super strong, and the whole don't kill anybody. The fact that gag goes
Why?
through the entire
What?
he'll
I
live.
was trying to find a GIF to send you guys of him just saying why over and over, and I couldn't. But that killed me.
Pop-O-Holics meme department needs to come up with it. Get that on a loop. Yeah, I just love that he shoots everybody in the kneecaps. The story.
He'll live.
It serves two purposes. The story needs someone John, who's the heart of them, of we can't just go around killing people. And that also serves the audience purpose of we're going to be less empathetic to, the good Terminator if he's going around shooting cops in the face. That's not going to be very digestible. So I love that gag works throughout the whole thing. It's funny, it's smart, and it serves such a great purpose.
One thing I did want to bring up as I was watching it this time around, and listening to the trailer just now kind of answered my own question. But when I first saw this movie, it had already been out for over a decade. So I was already well aware that, the T-800 had essentially switched roles from the first film when I saw this. But what an awesome, I was watching it this time trying to push that knowledge out of my brain, because the movie does this thing where it tries to hide whether or not the T-800 is good or bad, and whether or not the T-1000 is good or bad, whether it's there to protect John or not. So up until the scene where they both kind of confront each other for the first time in the hallways of the Galleria, the audience is supposed to be unaware as to which of these robots has been sent back to protect John Connor. So there's this sense of tension in that scene. But having just listened to that trailer, that was a piece of information that was totally revealed before the movie even came out, which is kind of tragic in my opinion. One of those missed opportunities to really present this audience with a crazy twist, a subversion of their expectations from what they had seen from the first film. So did either of you ever thought about that while watching the movie, or? Because it's pretty common knowledge that, the T-800 in this movie is a good guy.
It's so early and it's so much part of the plot. And I think the movie does the smart thing and does the well-crafted execution of both John and Sarah not knowing that, and they sell it very, very well.
They do.
Of them being scared. So it works for the movie. So the movie still stays intact, and it feels relevant, but it doesn't feel like the whole movie hinges on the fact that you didn't know that, and it doesn't feel cheap. It feels just like it explains itself well. So I don't think it's the biggest of deals, but I agree. You loyal listeners alike, and you guys know that my opinions are going as blind as possible. And you're right. I think it sets it on a whole new what's going to happen? This robot's protecting. I think that's super cool. Unfortunately, I feel like I knew that too, because again, I saw this movie before Terminator 1, so I didn't have the context, the Terminator. So I agree. It would have been quite a wonderful thing not to even see that coming. But yeah, if I was the marketing person, I would have tried to sell it as, maybe the reverse, or that it was just, Arnold back, and just because they kind of do it in the trailer where they don't show Arnold with Sarah and John too much. So it's almost like they're not feeding it too much into you that he's a good guy, but he is fighting this other robot. So
right.
I don't know. There's a way to sell it, to cut to the action beats and have you not
hide
know
that piece of information. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say I obviously knew going in, but like you mentioned, Christian, because of how we see the character so confused with the foreknowledge that he had compartmentalized as his mom just being crazy and being confronted with it in that moment, the tension worked there for me, even knowing who was who.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so kind of going into the themes of this movie, I'd like to discuss what you guys came away with on this viewing. Chris, we're not going to start with you. Brian, please.
God damn it.
I'm going to default to Chris. I'm going to give it up. Chris, go ahead, please.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate it.
Against the rules. Not the host, doesn't have the rules. Brian, please proceed. Nah, Chris, you can go. Fine.
All right. I don't care if Brian goes
cut
first.
the baby
Whatever.
in half.
Okay, so themes that I came away with this viewing are your. I feel your your standard fare when it comes to any Terminator film, which is the themes of defying fate, and then themes of how should I phrase this? Basically, fear of like futurism, you know, or fear of like technology rising above what we're able to control. Those seem to be the common through lines for most Terminator films, you know, because most of the films are about Sarah Connor trying to change the fate that she knows, or change the future that she knows to exist, and see if she's capable of defying that fate. So does fate exist or not, basically, I would say is, or is it set in stone rather, is one of the main themes of this film. Brian, what about you?
Yeah, definitely agree with both of those. It gets explicitly said the future's not set. There's no fate but what we make for ourselves.
Exactly.
Right? It's definitely on the page there. You mentioned the fear of futurism. I think just showing how things would progress towards fully automated military aircraft. It's interesting because this movie, it's so much action. And I feel like the pace for being 2.5 hours, this movie flies by and did not feel nearly as long as it is. But they'll do this thing where I had to pause and go back a couple times because there's 2 or 3 moments where they just do a data dump of what's happened previously. And it's almost secondary to what's happening, but there's so much really to dive into there, just with like I said, so the progression to, which makes perfect sense, where we have drones and stuff today, unmanned military aircraft. They got to a point where humans were no longer making military decisions, which it's something that what's the Will Smith movie, I, Robot, kind of deals with a very similar set of issues. But I thought just watching it today, it felt like it couldn't possibly, I don't think people could have realized while watching it, kind of like The Matrix, you know? It's like watching The Matrix today and these types of movies, living in a fully integrated, fully connected digital world. It brings such crazy perspective to how vulnerable we are to these same issues that are being presented here, you know? And then there's obviously time travel, which is a whole different bag of tricks. But so a little bit about Sarah Connor. I feel like there is, and maybe I'm reading a little too much into it, but an element of being gaslit, like women being gaslit by society, being not believed, you know, a lot of, and I'm up in the air as to how much I like the voiceover. I get that she's probably been in solitary confinement for 10 years, basically, at this point. Not going to be a particularly verbal person, probably. I think that psychologically makes sense. So she's really fleshing stuff out for us in the voiceover. But she mentions that, and we brought it up when she's talking about the Terminator being the best father figure for him, that he's never going to come home drunk and abuse him. He's never going to do these things. And it sounds like, you know, she went through some problematic relationships with men in the past that the son also references. So I just think how that's presented, and how, you know, obviously in today it's hard because I think movies tend to give, or a lot of times will give medical professionals, especially in terms of psychiatry, a bad rap. But this is obviously a circumstance that is where time travel is involved, similar to Bruce Willis's character in 12 Monkeys, where it's hard to think that anyone, even if you wanted to believe her, it's like, yeah, it's very difficult to accept this on its face. And you see how secondarily it basically reminded me of, and this is a whole different topic, but basically how things like UFOs, if a UFO crashed and something was collected, I think this movie shows pretty much how this type of things would be immediately taken by corporate interests / the government, compartmentalized to hell, and discounted, you know? So I don't know, Chris, you're like, yeah, this is the good stuff. But I don't know. I really thought there was so much conceptually to dig into here, and I loved it.
Well, this movie is so topical, and like even the term Skynet has become such a it's
almost like Big Brother, right? Like,
right, exactly.
It's also
part
the
of our
name
verbal
of the Chinese facial recognition platform that their government uses.
This is real?
What?
I'm not shitting you. And the creator said, I named it
we gotta shut it down.
the Terminator one because I love that movie.
Skynet. What is that?
The Terminator is the favorite film of our founder. So they use the same name, but they want to put something good into this system.
So, okay, in the Terminator, Skynet is evil, rains down death from the sky. But in China, Skynet is good.
Yeah, that's the difference.
But I feel okay. So anyone working in the technology industry who loves the Terminator films should, especially if they're working on those types of projects, should probably like take into consideration the messages that the Terminator films are trying to deliver. Like,
Oh no, they assured the press that it's not gonna be like that.
Oh, good.
oh, just like every other character in every Terminator film that's ever existed. Okay. Sure. Like Dyson wasn't trying to do anything evil. He was just having fun playing with like exceptional futuristic technology and developing things that humanity has never seen. His intention was not to build murderous AI that destroys humanity. That's terrifying. But what I was going to say is Skynet is like built into the zeitgeist, where like we even refer jokingly. Now that I my mind's totally fucked now that I know that it's like a real thing out there. Anyway, we jokingly call things like, you know, iCloud or like these servers that store a lot of our data, Skynet, because of how popular this particular franchise is. And it's, you know, we could dive into like conspiracy and shit, but it's alarming because I mean, like with all the technology that we have right now, could this potentially happen in the future? I don't think there's an AI intelligent enough to actually do something like this, but that's a whole other thing, I suppose. A whole other rabbit hole to go down.
I think you guys are hitting it. I was actually struck how focused this movie is. You know, when I was talking about Final Fantasy X earlier in the what we were consuming quick hit section, saying that game is about so much and that it's almost about nothing really one central thing. And this is kind of the complete opposite. This movie is pretty much only about that. There's a little bit of family dynamic and trauma and some stuff like that, but it is mostly about being worried about the apocalypse and what men do. You know, with building, you know, it's almost that Godzilla fear of nuclear war. You know, what have we created? And I think it summed up really well when Sarah Connor has Dyson cornered in his house, and she decides not to kill him, but they're discussing their next steps. And she says, "Men like you built the hydrogen bomb. You think you're so creative. You don't know what it's like to really create something, to create a life, to feel it growing inside you. All you know how to do is create. Oh God, excuse me. All you know how to create is death and destruction." And I think that sums up kind of the fears and concerns, and it's really prominent that it does come from you know, a female character, because most of these terrible warfare inventions have come from men, and now she's completely traumatized because of the failures of men to understand their actions. And I don't think the movie is overtly making any super dense claims about like burn the patriarchy or anything. But it does highlight like the cost of war and the cost of advancements that are not, you know, regulated or controlled and kind of left to their own devices that can, you know, self-realize and kill us. So I feel like that's prevalent. You guys mentioned it really well. But that leads us into kind of Sarah Connor's place in this movie. You know, we're doing this movie because Chip seemed to really like it more than the last movie that we talked about. So we were like, hey, yeah, Sarah Connor's a great character. But it's insane that she's kind of, in my opinion, in transferring to talking about her, she is like a product of the failures of this movie, or not the failures of the movie in general, but the failures of this universe. She is a product of the destruction to come. She's a product of the war ahead. She's the product of the failure of society. And she is revolting, and she's a very interesting character. And I think why I'm really glad we're talking about her, because she's not the protagonist of this story. She's not the main character. She's really kind of wrong in a lot of ways, whereas John is very hopeful and actively tries to pursue preserving life, whereas she's like, we're all dead anyway, so fuck them. Like she is past the point of playing nice. She wants to assassinate people to prevent things. She has the philosophy of let's kill baby Hitler. Like that is how she is treating her knowledge of the future. So in a lot of ways, morally, she's a little reprehensible, which I think is super cool to have her kind of as the previous heroine and be in this really interesting spot. And the most importantly, knowing what she's gone through and how the movie portrays her, really can't blame her too much, right? She really is justified in her feelings and having been oppressed. So how did you guys think Linda Hamilton did as an actor in this, and how do you think she fits in this story? And yeah, please, Chris, please, I would be happy if you started with this one.
No, I completely agree with a lot of the things that you said. Like if you receive the information dump that she receives in the Terminator, I think you would probably become what we see Sarah Connor become in this film, this survivalist. As you said in the movie, she even says like she's willing to kill people because they're already dead anyway if she fails. So what's the point? What's the point of even trying to preserve any type of life? So compared to other heroines that we've looked at over the past month, I definitely think, like you said, she's a little more morally reprehensible, as you put it. Like I don't know if we're not necessarily supposed to be rooting for her.
Well, so I think you're definitely, you got to be behind her on some level, right? Because I think similarly, even though she's not the best at showing it, she is fundamentally trying to make sure that her son survives, right? Because she knows how important it is. But I think what works so well as a contrast to her character, like you said, Christian, she is a product of this. She has been ostracized by society because of what she knows that they don't, and how unwilling they are to look forward and look past the immediacy of things like this research. But seeing John as a contrast to her, really already she has. And I don't know how, it was a little unclear to me how long. I guess it was 10 years that she was in prison. Do we know how long it had been since she had seen her son?
I think she said, I haven't seen my son in 7 years or something, because he would have been, I think it was 7, but I could be wrong. Because he's like 15, so he wouldn't have been, I don't know. She teaches a bunch of shit. So...
Right.
Could have been like a baby.
I don't know if an actual date is ever stated. I'd have to look into it.
I think when she's in the mental hospital and she says like, it's been 7 years since I've seen my son or something.
Okay. So, but I think it just goes to show we get to see the hope that John has is really what makes him such a good leader, and what is inevitably going to bring him to where he needs to be in saving humanity, because of that compassion for others, that because of what she's been through, to some level, understandably, she's lost that, right? Obviously, being hunted and then being told that you're crazy for it has got to be an atrociously difficult thing to deal with psychologically. Throw someone in a room by themselves and drug them up, and that's just going to exacerbate the whole thing. So I think,
and lick her face. Oh my god,
that was atrocious.
It's horrible.
Yeah, that was atrocious. Yeah, and
but
another
man, it
thing
makes
that's
it
like,
feel so good when he gets hit in the kneecaps, and she gives him a little extra than I think she would normally give someone she was trying to take down.
Yeah, no, definitely. And so little things like that, because we'll get into the Bechdel test and how this movie fares in that regard. But I think, like we talked about with Harley a bit, Chris, you said this character is very, very morally gray at best, right? And the fact that we can understand her plight. We have a movie previously where we saw, why she became this way,
which is a very important part of her character. I will mention Chip.
So she's gone through all this, lost, even though it was a short fling, what basically is like the love of her life on some level. There's so much that she's been through, and
she's been told that she's going to birth the savior of humanity.
Right.
So
not
like
that
I
didn't even think about.
It is placed on her shoulders as well.
And just on that note, it's like, so did her son sent the guy who had sex with her back to create himself?
He didn't know. I doubt he knew that. Well,
no. John Connor, excellent matchmaker, even for his own birth. He's one of the greats.
I need you to do things. Protect my mom. Fuck my mom.
I've heard she looks pretty good. So especially at that age, I didn't know her much when I was young, but I'm sorry.
She's not militant yet.
Right.
I think doesn't Kyle Reese fall in love with her prior to, like, he knows what she looks like. So like he is attracted to her even prior to going back to save her. It's been a while since I've seen the first one.
Yeah, I don't remember.
We
either.
just cut to like, all right, John Connor having a meeting. I need to send someone back to protect my mom.
Me, I'll do it. I'll go.
I got it. I got dibs.
I want to go.
Dibs,
Send me.
dibs.
Anyone else? Is there anyone else who wants to go?
No, just me. I'm the best
God,
candidate.
Okay, all right, okay. It's a little uncomfortable for me, but yeah. So
Everyone else, put your hands down.
I think it is, definitely some different for women on screen to show someone who is so unrepentantly complicated and who still we get, honestly, watch this movie. In one of my notes, I'm just like, she's a terrible mother. Like she's just a dick to her son for a good portion of this movie. And when she finally comes around and is able to re-see the compassion and humanity in her son when he comes to prevent her from killing Dyson, it really contextualizes like, wow, okay, I've lost my path. I need him with me.
I might have crossed a line.
I don't know if I would say that she's a terrible mother, Brian. She's definitely cold.
That's what I mean.
Focused on one specific thing, but the survival of her son is definitely important to her. She's just not really there for him on an emotional level until that moment in the film. But I don't know if I would go as far to call her like a terrible mother.
No, I mean, and obviously
she is crazy a little bit.
She was forced into a mental facility, so I can't blame her specifically for that.
Yeah.
But one thing in particular was when she tries to escape. She clearly was about to get murdered by the T-1000, and Terminator and her son save her, and then she's like, "I didn't need your help. I would have gotten out of there." And it's like, come on now. They just saved your ass, and you're just gonna turn around and just like.
But that's because she's like narrow-mindedly focused on his survival solely.
And she's been thinking about is the face of the T-800, and that is the mortal doomsday enemy. So she probably isn't super happy to see him on any side. It's like, you're the reason why I'm here and why I'm a bad mother and why the world's gonna end.
I'm not trying to trash her as a mother. Cold is that's the better way to put it, Chris, and more accurately reflects how I feel.
As cold as the T-800's heart.
Ooh, icy.
Which turns out to be not so cold. I mean, literally cold because it's made of machine, but figuratively, it was warmed over the course of T2.
So let's talk about the Bechdel test.
Yes.
So we have a split decision here. I'm going to be the Solomon again, splitting the baby in half. Brian, this technically passes the Bechdel test, but Chris, you disagree that this indeed does. Brian, why don't you fill us in on the status of the official word on the Bechdel test for this movie?
So the website that I've been using, BechdelTest.com,
that's a good one. That's the one.
It's one of the ones. They have a pretty good amount from every year where they go through, and a movie can be marked with a green check mark, but there's still, and this one is very conflicted. So it's interesting to read how people argue this. So one of the main things is you have to distinguish whether you're talking about named female characters or not, which is something that wasn't in the original version of the Bechdel test, from what I understand, but is a common use today for how people justify it. The scene that I think could potentially save this movie, in my understanding, and let me know if you found something else, Chris, but it's the scene where they get to the desert part outside of the city with the weaponry, and they meet the people who are speaking Spanish, and her character speaks to the mother character in the background, and they're speaking Spanish to one another. So unless you can understand Spanish, you can't tell what they're saying, but I guess it's just like a greeting thing saying nice to meet you. So some people are arguing that is one, but I'm going to go ahead and say, for the sake of what the test is arguing, this is probably a fail, unfortunately.
Yeah, I completely agree. The site itself even says that it's kind of dubious in the way that it passes the test because of instances like what you're bringing up. Some people use, I think, the sequence in the Dyson home as
when they're clearly talking to the
justify,
father, though, like
right. Like unfortunately for a film that has such a strong female performance, I just can't justify saying that this film passes the Bechdel test in any way, shape, or form. Because Sarah Connor is literally the only named female character in this film outside of the
his
credits.
His aunt?
Yolanda
that's true.
might be the woman that I was talking about. Yolanda, I think she is named.
Yolanda,
apparently.
and then his aunt and uncle have
His
names.
foster mom. His
Oh,
foster
that's
mom
true.
also
Or- yeah,
has a
yeah, foster-
name. So I will concede to that.
But she doesn't
Christian.
talk to
But
any other
none of
female
those characters
characters, though.
ever interact with one. Like Sarah Connor never talks to the foster mom. So none of these women ever interact with each other in any type of meaningful way, in my opinion. So I don't think this passes at all. What do you think, though, Christian?
Yeah, this is kind of the issue with the Bechdel test, because this is a very like bro-y movie that features a strong female protagonist, like our female character in it. And so for that, it's just a very interesting test case of like one of the more interesting like female characters we've ever had in like an action movie up until this point, right? And even still to this day. Whereas it's like, would this movie be better and make the movie make more sense if Yolanda and Sarah Connor had a conversation to the side? Like maybe it's possible. But that didn't necessarily serve the story they were telling. So this is where I would, argue that the Bechdel test is a good way to go like, hey, let's look at media as a whole and see how many fail this mark. I think that's a failure of the overall Hollywood system and movies that are made rather than a failure of this movie in particular, because any movie like just because like I there's probably plenty of movies that pass the Bechdel test that don't have as interesting as a woman and as prevalent as a woman character as Sarah Connor, especially in an action movie, right?
Yeah.
So I think for that it should be commended. If it doesn't pass the actual test, I can understand that. And maybe Yolanda and Sarah Connor should have smoked a joint together. Just talked about being a mom. I don't know. Might have been interesting. So James Cameron, way to fuck up. But I think overall the legacy of this film still stands out, and stands out as Sarah Connor being a kind of a really important female character, especially considering a early 90s action bro movie about like a death robot. And like the savior of society protecting him, right? I still think that's super cool that they incorporated her in that way, where they could have done the T3 route, which was Terminator 3, which is just be like, oh, John Connor. Like it'd been so simple to be like, all right, John Connor's a man now, which is what we see in Salvation and Terminator 3, right? And this movie, Cameron decidedly wanted Linda Hamilton's character to be a part of this, and saw that as important. And the themes of futurism don't work as well without her, and the themes of kind of paternal and like female motherhood figures, like the light stuff they do there, wouldn't have worked without her. So it was very smart of Cameron to include her. But yeah, they could have had another female character. Yeah.
I would think, having not seen Terminator Dark Fate yet, just based on the trailers, I bet you anything that film actually does pass the Bechdel test, considering how many named female characters are in that movie. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I'll probably end up watching it later this week or something, but I would assume that's a better candidate and passes the test in a more meaningful way than this movie does. Not to take anything away from this movie, like you said, Christian. I agree with you that the Bechdel test is a great starting point, but it doesn't necessarily have to pass to be meaningful.
And it's kind of like, especially thinking about the time that it came out, it is like delivering it's kind of like a Trojan horse for men to watch and like feel more empathy and more respect for a female character. It's like you take this very masculine movie and it's like people are like, we'll go see some fucking robots with guns and shit. And like, admittedly, I'm in that camp of enjoying those things, but it is like, what a great way to introduce a character in a movie like this. And I think that's why she still stands out, and it is important. We're talking about it to this day. And I don't think it would be the movie that it is without her. So for that, we can appreciate it.
I just want to say, before we wrap up here, Arnold holding up and looking at that baby like it was like a disgusting piece of trash, just so like, what is this little thing, is incredible, and one of the best levity moments of the movie, I thought.
When I was younger, that scene always made me nervous, because I was like, he's gonna accidentally kill this child. like unintentionally or something. But it's a very funny scene.
Now I do want to note, there is an extended cut of this movie. I don't recommend it. It makes it too bloated. This movie, I think already, like Brian, you said, it's tightly paced. I think it drags a little more than an action movie would, but I think that is what adds the extra character elements and I think some of the extra story stuff. But the extended cut, it extends the stuff at the beginning to where we don't get that bike chase until like 40 minutes in. There's a conversation with Sarah Connor and Kyle Reese. It's an interesting thought experiment and adds a little bit of character, but it adds a little too much bloat to the tightness of the movie. So if you're looking at it to rewatch, you've got excited about our conversation, you want to rewatch Terminator 2, I would recommend just buying it digitally for the regular version, or at least buying an option that has both. Because I've bought the special edition before and rewatched that extended cut and did not enjoy it.
Yeah, I was actually talking to Brian about that during our break, that I own the Skynet edition Blu-ray, but out of just sheer laziness. What? Yeah, the Chinese version, where that you install a Chinese surveillance system into your household so they can spy on you. So I own that version that comes with the extended edition, but out of sheer laziness, because it also came with a digital copy, I just ended up streaming my digital copy instead of putting the Blu-ray into the player. But I completely forgot that there was an extended version of this film. I think I've only seen it once when I first bought the Blu-ray. But the theatrical cut is perfect. I highly recommend that one over anything else.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. So I'd recommend that. And I believe it's only $8 on iTunes. It's not too much, and you rent it for $3.
Great,
so check it out. It's also in 4K now. It's 4K Ultra HD. So got a new TV.
It looks incredible.
It still looks so good. We can talk briefly. We're running super long, but I do want to touch briefly on the legacy of the special effects, which is like that conversation I'm constantly having, especially with these Marvel movies, about just the blend of, this was like one of the first movies along with Jurassic Park that really use CGI to a great effect, and it only works so well because it's just blended with practical effects, and because I'll link it in the show notes. Interview with the he's now 70, the basically the creative director behind Industrial Light and Magic. Let's see, let me make sure I get his name.
And that is that Spielberg's company or Lucas's company?
Yes.
George Lucas.
Lucas's company, yeah. Dennis Murin, who's now super old. But he was just explaining how the balance of it and the rules that he always followed would be, make the laws of nature make sense, make the, gravity make sense. And if work with your director to make sure that if you can't make it look good, talk with the director and figure out what angle on the camera will make it look really good. And you see that one of the most effective things that still makes the CG, it obviously looks dated, but it still doesn't take you out of the world. Just for the simple fact of the liquid metal T1000, they're constantly throwing like blue lights on him, and just the reflection of the world around him that they painted on his like metallic skin. It just does such a good job of making you feel like it's actually there. And it's a rule that you wonder why this, even though the liquid metal is a very simple texture and it's not too crazy, they just got the fundamentals right and made it have rules, which I think makes it work so much better than even technically higher resolution, higher detail CGI that just ignores the laws of physics or anything. I think that's really incredible.
Yeah.
And to counter that with Christian, we talked about with the Phantom Menace, right? This was 8 years later. The Phantom Menace comes out and they have the ship where they cannot get the reflections off of this thing to look good at all.
Yeah.
And you brought that up before I had rewatched this. And what was the scene where he comes down out of the elevator? I was like, wow, I see the floor of the elevator. I see the walls of the elevator.
Right.
It's all so well done.
Yeah. And just a lot of great practical effects. I believe that helicopter chase at the end, the helicopter's on a crane that's driving, and they filmed it out of, that's how the helicopter was down and going that fast.
Okay, wait, taking the motorcycle to the upper floor. I forgot that he was going to do, I was like, oh my God, yes, please.
Yeah,
that was
incredible.
Awesome.
Yeah. And one of my favorite things, the most iconic thing that always comes to my mind when I think about this movie is the way Arnold Schwarzenegger cocks the shotgun on his motorcycle.
Yes, so
that
ridiculous.
is literally the most, because like I still don't understand how that works. I guess because it's like, I guess it cocks like a Remington rifle where you pull this, not the stock, but the lever down, and what he's doing is flinging it, which pulls the lever down and cocks the nest shell in, and then that he uses that motion to flip it over. I like never understood it, and I was always like, man, it's the coolest fucking thing in the world.
Yes, same.
You know, we should have done, or I should have done a little more research prior to this episode for that particular scene. But when I was watching it, I thought the exact same thing. And I was thinking, is this the first time we've seen anybody wield a shotgun like that in a film? Because I'm sure we've seen it since then, but it was so like new at that point, you know? Like this, that scene sticks out in my mind as being something where I'm like, that is fucking cool. Like I've never seen anybody do that before.
It feels so video gamey in a way that like video games are now, you know, it felt like it was so ahead of its time. Yeah, there's a lot of cool shotgun pumping. And in a highlight, as we end this, I do want to highlight Linda Hamilton's when she's fighting the T-1000 back and she only has one arm because she got stabbed through that side, and she's just like shooting it and then dropping it and cocking it with one hand and then propping it back up.
Yeah.
A lot of cool shotgun play. Yeah, that scene actually stood out to me this watch through of like, wow, that's like really powerful. Like that, she is a tough cookie.
It requires a lot of muscle to do that. So
yeah.
And at that point, she's already stabbed, shot, like
right
in rough shape.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, good watch through. Glad to go back through it. Thanks for the recommendation, Chip.
Yeah, seriously, I was really happy to rewatch this as well.
Yeah, and I thought about like saving it for like a Terminator month, but I was like, there's no way I'm watching any of these fucking movies. Like I'm like not. It is unfortunately one of the best action movies of the 90s, but yet it is part of a series that overall is just.
We were even toying around with the idea of doing like a Terminator month when Dark Fate was coming out in theaters, but we opted not to. I can't remember what we did instead.
I think I just came off the 15 minutes I watched of Genesis and was like, no, I don't. I'm someone who will watch a bad movie. I will sit through it and critique it and analyze it. And seeing a bad movie is a great way to think about why good movies are good and why bad movies are bad. This was a step too far, and maybe if I'm in a better mood, but man, I had to shut it off. I was just like, it's part of that, like even like the special effects of it all. It's all very CG. Like I'll tell you, it's like CG Arnold Schwarzenegger with a CG helicopter that comes down and he has a CG rocket launcher. And it's just like, make an animated movie, please. If that's how you want to go. Cool. Chris, what do we got coming up next week?
We're going to discuss it.
It's going to be a surprise to both the Pop-O-Holics squad. I was interested to see what you say. Yes, we will be figuring that out and posting that. Obviously, with everything going on with the COVID-19 and everything, it put a lot of things up in the air. A lot of our plans have been shaken. So if you have any ideas, please email us at popaholicscast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear what you want to hear us cover. But we're going to figure that out. We're going to be back delivering some goodness to you next week. Brian, Chris, anything else?
No, I think that's
Stay healthy and safe, everybody.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, do some push-ups. I know I got to do some more. I need to really just get back into my VR headset and swing some lightsabers around.
I feel personally attacked by this push-ups comment. And
Brian, you're looking a little rotund. Time to get back to the full body workout. You and me both, brother. All right. We'll see everyone next week, guys. We'll be talking. Please stay safe, stay healthy. I said that first before Chris. I'll edit that out. Bye, everybody. I care about you. Chris does not. Sorry, I was seasoning my steak and putting it out. You know, my steaks have been going bad.
Is that what the kids are calling it these days? I'm seasoning my steak, Mom. I'm sorry.
Don't interrupt me. This is me time.
Yeah, like, I don't know if it's the way that they're packaging the steak, but my steaks keep going bad after like a day. Luckily, it's like...
refrigerating them?
Yeah, they're just a little slimy. I thought it was me because I'm walking like 20 minutes with it. So like I got an ice pack and bought a bunch of other frozen shit when I got it.
It's too fast.
It's too fast. I think it's they wrap it and completely cover it and then put it in a paper bag. And I just don't know if something like that. So what I've been doing is I've been getting them and immediately salting them and putting them back in. So they're just like a little salted. But yeah.
Do you have a freezer?
Yeah, but I don't like freezing and thawing meats. Like I shouldn't have to freeze it right when it gets back.
Not for 2 days or something. That's crazy. Maybe have you tried making your fridge a little colder? Is it adjustable?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I just turned it down. Yeah. I mean,
okay.
it's really cold. It's gonna freeze my. So I'm gonna do some like research on like if that's the packaging or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just a super side story, but I've had to take back 2 steaks already, and this one like I just bought it last night. And I was taking it out today, and I'm like, oh, it's a little slimy already. I think it's gonna be fine, but it's already like, oh, if I would have left it in there for a day. No, I don't buy my meat from fucking Target. No, I bought it from Sprouts. It's fucking super expensive. It's grass-fed, super expensive meat. It's like a $15 steak.
So now it's got me. Is everything else just like chock full of so much preservatives that like natural meat?
Probably.
You know, no, 100%. Yeah,
salt thing, I felt like you're going back to straight Oregon Trail ties now.
Yeah.
Throw some salt on that bitch, throw it in the barn for a few months.
I've got my steaks up on hooks in my living room.
Yeah.
I salt them regularly to make sure they stay maintained.
I was telling my dad, I was like, I'm gonna look crazy. I was like, I'm gonna go in with a thing of salt to the meat market and be like, hey, before you package that, just let me. Maybe keep going bad on me. I don't know what to say, man. Don't look at me weird.
Are you dissing my meats? Do I not package my meats well enough for you? Why do I have a New York accent but I live on the West Coast?
Yeah, this is definitely an SNL sketch.
It's crazy, man. Yeah, I just haven't figured it out. Like I thought it was me at first. I was like, oh, they're going bad. They're like starting to turn in my bag. They're getting too warm where they need to be cooked right away. But I got it back and I felt it. It was ice cold last night. But it's not bad. It's just already a little slimy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that sucks, bro.
Yeah. Yeah, it does suck. All right. Moving on to bigger, better things. You guys aren't red meat eaters, so. You guys are like, that's why you shouldn't eat cows, bro.
I don't know. Dude, Mickey and I have like a ton of ground beef frozen in our freezer right now and a couple of steaks. I made homemade meatballs for dinner tonight, so we're back on the red meat train.
It's a good train. Dun, 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 dun. You know what I noticed? I know we need to be done with this soon, but I do want to tell you guys, I didn't realize, and I thought it was scary. So I have a bathtub here, and when I was younger, I really like baths. Like I like hot baths. They just make me feel good. I haven't taken a hot bath in forever. So since I've been here, I take like a hot bath once a week. And nice. I noticed when I first started taking him, I'm like, fuck, I got out and I was like lightheaded and my heart was racing.
It's because it's too hot, probably.
Yeah, but I found out it's like, oh, like taking a hot bath is as good as like light exercise because it gets as soon as your hands and feet are at hot, your body starts to freak out like it's fevering and starts to plump blood to your vital organs. And it's like, it's like good for you, apparently. It's like, oh, you will get the benefit of a light exercise by taking a hot bath. But I'm like, oh, no, dude, I looked it up, but I'm like, man, this is getting old because I don't ever remember taking a hot bath and being like...
See, It's interesting you say that because my cousin, when me and my dad went out to San Francisco a few years ago, he was talking about, I think it was something from a Malcolm Gladwell book or something, that he was talking about showering and going, like doing 30-second intervals between hot and cold or something like that and how good it is for your heart. I can't remember specifically, but yeah, I've definitely heard that as well, something about that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's like shocking your body and your body's like freaking out and starts it's good for your heart health. So yeah,
30-second intervals. That is a very interactive shower.
Exactly, but it's like for a period of however many couple minutes.
Yeah, I've heard of the cold rinse. Like when you're working out.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
Yeah, because you don't want to leave your body in the state with the muscles it being hot or whatever. You want to like back it back in. I don't know the science, but
I'm gonna pee again. I'm sorry.
No worries. Our digressions are running so long, Brian has to take pee breaks from them.
Yeah, sorry.